G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of Talk and Stuff. And this is a very exciting one because we're going to be joined by a cool dude. And by that, I don't mean Aaron, who's sitting right there. I'm talking about a genuinely cool dude. Aaron's been talking to said cool dude just before we went on air. And I'll tell you what, he's practically blushing because it's like, oh my God, this is a genuine cool dude. And guess what? There's no Docky Who in this. How good is that, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, I was actually confirmed he has not worked on Doctor Who, so there you go.
So there's not going to be any Docky Who whatsoever, which is very, very cool. So I guess we should actually bring in the cool dude because I know people are going to be sitting there going, well, where is he? So without further ado, we're going to bring in the lad, and here he is. Just going to do this for the setup. Mr. Don Bies, welcome to the show, son.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, hang on. He's calling us He's insulting us already, dude.
I haven't been called a gentleman on the show before, I don't think.
Well, there we go. Russell's already joined and said, can't he wear a scarf at least? Oh, that's a very good point, actually. So, Mr. Don, I know you've been in Australia for a couple of weeks, but you're getting ready to jet out soon, but you've decided to come and join us, and thank you for doing so too. So, welcome to Australia. I know you've been here plenty of times before, but how you going, old son?
I'm good. It's been fun. It's been great catching up with you a couple times and now meeting Aaron. So yeah, this has been great.
Donny Boy. Oh, there we go. You're now officially Donny Boy. There you go. And obviously Shane has also mentioned it as well. Yes, Don is good, which is very, very cool. So for those who are, we mentioned like last week on the show that Don was going to be attending the Skyforce, the Star Wars meeting on Saturday to talk about Star Wars and all the rest of it. So we thought we'll bring him in today, but we'll actually talk about some of the other things that he's worked on, which is particularly groovy, all sci-fi related, of course. So to kick things off, let's not muck around because Aaron had a question about your work on The Fly. So ask you, Mr. Aaron, go for it.
Well, before the question of The Fly, as we discussed, a lot of your work has been on sci-fi. Were you a fan of the genre before you started working in the field, or was it something that, because you did special effects, you started working on sci-fi?
No, definitely. I from a young age, the film that made me want to get into filmmaking was Frankenstein. So that one can argue that that's a science fiction film. But what was intriguing to me about that was the makeup, and that's what started me on the path to try to get into the business. I was only 6 years old when I saw Frankenstein the first time on television. But I asked my mother, how do they do that? How do they make that man look like that? And she said they use makeup, and it's like, to me, makeup was lipstick and mascara and that sort of thing. So that started the whole thing, and by being a fan of that opened up the world of sci-fi to me. And so a huge Planet of the Apes was a big influence on me. King Kong, although not truly sci-fi, I guess. And then all the movies of the early 70s, Omega Man, Foreman Project, so yeah, definitely I was a huge sci-fi. I tended to also go for horror movies as well. So, but yeah.
So I'm a big fan of the horror movies, and it must have been exciting. You would have grown up with the original Fly, remaking The Fly, and it was totally different because you worked with one of my favorite directors, Cronenberg, who's famous for his body horror. And a lot of his movies have special effects that are quite disgusting and gory. How closely was a director like that working with the special effects department on the models and the visuals? And did he push it where he's like, no, I want it gorier, no, I want it slimier? Can you give us an insight to how he worked?
Yeah, well, no, I got to meet him. So we did the build of all the effects, all the puppets and all that sort of thing. I worked on that guy. We called that the Brundlefly or the Space Bug. But we did that, all the build in California, and there was a team of something like 25 to 30 of us. And then they shot it in Toronto, Canada. So I wasn't on the crew that went to Toronto, but Cronenberg came down at one point, and was there with Jeff Goldblum, and so I got to meet both of them briefly on that. He definitely he was Chris Wayless, who was my boss, who hired me for that. I was doing mechanical effects, and Chris was of course overseeing everything, and then Stéphane Dupuis was the makeup artist that did all the makeup on Jeff. They were incredibly close working together with him, and he really kind of left it up to once he I think described the idea, the science, his science behind the transformation and everything. Then it was really Chris and Stefan and a few others that really just started doing all the design work and all that. The other thing was that the film fell into Chris's shop very late in the game. I can't recall, there was another director that was involved with the film that I think something like his son tragically was killed in a car accident, and so he left. They put the project on hold, and then he came back, and then he just said he didn't want to do it anymore. So then Cronenberg got it, and I think there was Rob Bottin team was going to be doing some work on it, whatever it was. It fell through, and then all of a sudden Chris had it. And as I recall, Chris got it in like September of 1985, and they started shooting in late November. So it was very, very quick. So they threw a bunch of people on. That's luckily why I got involved, was because they needed so many people, and Chris was located in Northern California, not far from where Industrial Light and Magic was. And so most of the people he would share from Industrial Light and Magic. Well, Industrial Light and Magic was right in the thick of making Howard the Duck. So all the big creature makers, all the typical creature makers were all working on that. And so at that point, they reached out of their typical talent pool and were looking for other people. And so they brought some people up from Los Angeles. They brought me out from Chicago, and that was my break into it. But yes, the other question about did he go? There's scenes that they cut that I don't know if they cut them because they were so disgusting, or timing, or it just didn't work for the film. But there was more. there's a whole scene. I think it's all on the DVD.
Yeah,
there's a whole sequence.
The monkey cat scene.
Cat.
Which is very almost like the Thing in its presentation.
But he beats it to death with a stick,
as one does.
And those are Cronenberg's hands. Cronenberg actually beat it to death, and then after he gets the character Brundle gets disappointed with the fact that this didn't work, then he climbs up and goes climbs the wall and goes out the skylight onto the roof. And throughout the whole movie, and it's still in there, he keeps scratching his side, like his side torso, throughout the whole movie. And at that point, what happens is that a little fly arm digs itself out of his chest, to the side of his chest, and freaks him out. He slides down the wall or something, and then he leans over and he chews it off with his mouth, with his own teeth, chews it off, throws it to the ground, and it twitches. All that sequence is stuff that I worked on. I worked on the monkey cat. I made the little fly arm that twitched. I made the one that they puppeteered coming out of his side, and so all that got cut. And then later in the film too, when he's got the fly spit, he spits on the other guy, his antagonist, the guy that's, I can't remember the character's name now, and Stathis, is it? But then a little tongue comes out of his mouth, and he slurps up the decimated flesh and stuff. Yeah. And again, I made the tongue, and so I got cut too. So the only thing that's left in the movie that I worked on was the big puppet thing.
All right, we're going to move on from The Fly into something a little bit more easy to digest, because as Guy said, yeah, it sounds a tad on the gory side. I was going to say to anybody who's watching us live, if you want to post questions, you can actually ask Dodd some questions, which is very, very cool. So from something which is really grisly like The Fly, we're going to go something a little bit more upmarket and a bit more enjoyable. I didn't realize you worked on Galaxy Quest. So what was your involvement with this? I think it was to do with this scene here with the docking station. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I supervised the build for that, and so I had a small team of model makers, and we built that whole docking bay. Yeah, I told the story at the Skyforce the other day. Is that a lot of the movies you work on, obviously Star Wars, at least you hope that the movie's going to be good, but there's something about Galaxy Quest, because when we get a sequence to work on, sometimes we'll get the storyboards, and sometimes there'll be animation, animatics we call it, where they show a CG version of this quick animated version of the sequence. And sometimes there's live action footage cut in if they've already shot the sequence, because sometimes we're working on a movie before they actually get to that sequence. So this one was like they showed us the sequence of them all acting on the bridge as they're pulling out, and I'm just thinking, God, this is going to be horrible. This is just such a dumb looking movie. There's no proper sound effects. The sound on the recording is scratchy and bad, and it just, and they're overacting. All of them are overacting, like, oh, this is going to be a horrible film. And I was so wrong when the film came out, because I really enjoyed it when it came out.
So that must happen a lot, though, when you're working on like models for a lot of movies. You think you're just doing your one little bit, and you go, well, you put all your heart and soul into something. Hopefully, it makes it on screen, doesn't get edited out, and then you hope that the rest of the film supports the quality of the work that you've done. Have you ever been disappointed when you go, well, I've put everything into this, but the rest of the movie kind of sucks?
Actually, no, I don't think I ever have been. I have worked on some dogs of a film. I worked on a cheesy horror film that was shot in Montreal called the Kiss, and it happened to be the screen debut of Sean Levy, who was the director of Deadpool and Wolverine. He was an actor when he started out as an actor. I got to kill him with a demon cat puppet. So we spent a Sunday afternoon in a Jeep Wrangler, and I was ripping him apart. But yeah, it's like, it's like they're fun. Whenever I'd go on location, we're fun, and we're having a good time. And yeah, it's like, yeah, well, it'd be nice if I got paid, so it didn't matter. It doesn't matter if the movie's a dog. So.
Do you realize someone who gets a whole lot of Jeeps together, that's actually called a Jeep Wrangler? So there you go. Got a couple of comments coming through. So Hotline has joined us from Ukraine, which is absolutely fantastic. So gotta love that. And our first questions come through for you, dude. Besides Star Wars, what other projects have you worked on that you're most proud of? I'll get you to keep the answer relatively short if you could.
Yeah, it's Pirates of the Caribbean, the first Pirates of the Caribbean, because we had just finished. I just finished working on episode 2, I think it was, and then I was working on the Matrix sequels for a little bit, and everything we were building up until that point, everything I had been building up to that point was this like futuristic tech, or Star Wars-y tech stuff, and gloppy this, gloppy that, and I got to build pirate ships, and that's the first time I actually also started doing full-fledged computer modeling, 3D modeling, to do the laser cutting to make the ships, and it was a ton of fun. So they brought in actually a proper shipwright, taught us how to build ships, and we built the ships pretty much like you build a real ship.
So you built the Black Pearl?
Yes, 3 ships: Black Pearl. Actually, no. The first one I built 2: Black Pearl and the Dauntless, which is the English Navy's, the Royal Navy's ship that pursued them. Black Pearl was 1/6 scale, I believe, and it was I don't know in meters, but it's 17 or 18 feet long, something like that. It was pretty big.
Being a model maker, there must be, weeks and months and hundreds of hours that go into building models. Have there ever been a model that you've had to blow up where you've gone, oh, gee, that's sad to see that one go?
No, it's a question I get asked a lot, and it's like it was always cathartic. It's like kind of your time. Yeah, let's see that thing blow up. I want to see how well we can make that turn into a bunch of sawdust.
You could tell it glows. Got another question come through. Christy said, besides Boba Fett, which we will touch on later on, fans, so just sit tight. Have you had any other acting gigs? And if so, were you credited?
Well, I'm actually in all five of the Star Wars two of the prequels and the 3 Star Wars films in the special editions. And no, I wasn't credited and all that. But I mean, I wouldn't call any of them acting gigs, to be honest with you. I was able to fit into the suit. That's basically why I got the gigs. But I have done acting. I have done acting gigs. I used to do theater, and my daughter's an actress. But I no, nothing else.
Yeah,
aside
I kind of figured the answer was going to be no. I know Aaron's got a question, but first things, Spankin has actually asked, Fire in the Sky is based on a true story. Do you actually believe it? And do you meet the real people from the story? And did you get to keep any of the props?
There were no props. No, I don't want to keep any. That's actually one of the films that I had a really miserable time on for various sordid reasons. But I did actually meet the guy that it was based on. He came to watch this film. That's, by the way, that's Nelson Hall, one of the other Boba Fett's underneath the rubber sheet there. And apparently none of this was like at all what he claimed, what his version of the story was. So this was all total fabrication, had nothing to do whatsoever with whatever his recollection of his supposed encounter was. And no, I don't believe it really happened. I think the guy was just a little drunk or something.
You can say full of shit. It's okay.
Yeah.
You can say that.
Well, that guy was Travis Walton, and he was an adoptee who they took his story. And I have noticed when he was first doing promo for this movie, he said he didn't remember anything about what happened. So yeah, everything was made up. Now, years and years later, what he remembers seems to be influenced by what you did in the movie.
Yeah, well, it was funny because one of the main reasons we didn't like it. So here's some behind the scenes dirt for you. DB Sweeney played Travis, right? And the director was Rob Lieberman, I think it was. And when they started the filming, DB came to ILM because we had to do a live cast of him because we were going to do some stuff. And I was responsible with a guy named Howie Weed who played the Wampa in the special edition. Howie and I did all the surgical stuff that was happening to him on the table. We came up with the gag of the rubber sucking him down to the table and all that. And like I said, it turns out that's actually Nelson Hall that's doubling DB in there. They went to shoot, and DB was very excited about this shoot. And then they came to ILM to film all the abduction stuff at the end of the shoot. And by the end of the shoot, the director was not speaking with DB. He was not. I don't think he was speaking with the visual effects supervisor either. He was going through intermediaries on set with these because they all hated each other. They were all like it was the most dysfunctional job second most dysfunctional job I've ever worked on. And it was just a miserable shoot. Again, the people I work with, we got to work with the same people over and over and over again. Those people are great. ILM was great. It just was this production that came in. It was just like, oh man, I don't think anybody had a good time working on that film.
One thing I did not know you worked on, and Colin, who's in watching the chat at the moment, he's the president of the Star Trek Club, is you actually worked on a Star Trek movie, Generations. How good was
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So while I've been here, my son and I have been catching up on old Star Trek films. We started with Wrath of Khan and worked our way over to First Contact. Although I think we skipped was it 5 and 6, but we did watch Generations, and it was funny watching it again because um, the series I worked what's his name? Who Malcolm McDowell played? I can't remember the character. Soren. Yeah. So when the thing when they blow up, spoilers. Yeah. I made a miniature of that. I don't know if that's my miniature. No, I don't think that's it. They did that full size. Yeah, that's what I worked on. Except then we did that. We blew it up and everything, and then they decided, you know what, we're going to go blow up the real one. So they went back to the and they blew it up, and they didn't use our shot, so that got cut. So yeah, we're watching it. My son says, "Didn't you work on that?" It's like, "Oh yeah." I says, "But they didn't use my shot." So
Seems to be a common theme, doesn't it? Something happens in the visual effects department and then it gets done differently. I mean, there's probably a reason why they said blowing it up, the real thing is probably too complicated. But then, of course, the real thing looks more real. Because when I looked at this, I go, geez, I tell you what, for a miniature, that's pretty damn impressive. Maybe they couldn't get the fireball big enough or something. So,
yeah, I think it wasn't. There's various reasons why. Hi, Catherine. There's various reasons why they cut sequences. A lot of times it has to do with, it didn't look that good. Back then, that wasn't as much of an issue. I mean, it's because we were limited by technology. But other times it's just because, timing or whatever, it doesn't fit in the edit, whatever reason. A lot of it doesn't have to do with that it didn't look good. More than not, it's just that it didn't cut in.
When they cut a visual effects, when it's a completed effect, that's a lot of money they throw in the bin as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I told this at Skyforce that we worked on episode 2 with the See Threepio. Starts out as the puppet, the See Threepio that you see in episode 1, and we filmed all that with Anthony Daniels operating his the puppet, and we did the whole sequence and everything, and the whole sequence where Padme dresses him and everything, and then George just decided to cut it, and they had been finished with most of the effects for that. So.
Now, I think I know the answer to this question. Kevin's always asked, did you ever meet Yoda or his operators? That'd be Frank Oz, obviously. I would say the answer is yes. Is that right?
I told you. I think I told you that story the other day where I got to meet Frank. So on episode 2, when when Yoda was going to, Artoo's on my brain, when Yoda was going to be all digital for the first time ever, they decided to have Frank Oz come and do initially. It's called a scratch track. It's the first pass at an voiceover, and then they'll go back and usually refine that. And Frank didn't want to draw any attention to himself, so he asked for it to be done, on low key. So they flew him in because he was in New York and we were in London, and I was there for some shoots that we were doing in London for about 3 weeks at Ealing Studios, and they flew Frank in, came in on a Sunday morning, and it was just Frank, George, Rick McCallum, the producer, and Matt Wood, who was a sound recordist at the time. Now, he's now a big time sound designer, but at the time he was just recording extra sound. I think there was one other technician there. And the reason I was there is because because this was going to be the first digital R2, George wanted reference for the animators.
Yoda, dude, get digital Yoda.
Did I say R2 again? I'm sorry. George wanted reference for of Yoda for the animators, and so George's idea was Frank could puppet after he would do the voice. He would puppeteer a few lines, and if they could videotape it. And so I was there to help be Frank's assistant puppeteer on that, and which sounds very lofty, but actually, wasn't much other than that. Because I knew radio control stuff, and Yoda has radio control. And I almost said Artoo. And so we show up, and George suggests that to Frank. And Frank's like, oh, I don't know. He was very, very sweet, really, really nice guy. And he's like, I don't, we work for weeks practicing scenes, it's like, it's not going to look good. It's not going to look good. So George is like, oh, just come on, just do it. So he did. And, we put it up there, and the entire time, all I'm doing is operating eye blinks and maybe some ears or something. And Frank's doing all the hand in the mouth. And to me, what Frank was doing was looking amazing. I mean, he brought the thing to life, this big silicone puppet from episode 1 that I never cared for. But but Frank is apologizing the entire time. He's like, please don't show this footage to anybody. Please, looks horrible. This is just, no offense, Don. Sorry, you're doing a great job, but this is look. And so it was a wild time. I spent a couple hours in this literally a closet with, it was just me, George, and Frank, and I'm just sitting there while he's recording his lines. And
I can imagine you with the remote control thinking, oh, the eyes go this way, that way. Can I get them to go like googly eyes and like Marty Feldman eyes or whatever?
Well, the thing is, I mean, they didn't want me to keep coming and going. So I just sat there while he recorded his lines too. And, and it's so funny because Frank's voice is very similar to Yoda and Miss Piggy and Fozzie Bear, anyway, so he's talking like this the entire, you just can't but help but crack up a little bit. But he's such a sweet man, really, really sweet. I also met, a lot of people don't know this, but I met his sister, Jenny Oz. She actually used to work at ILM. She was like assistant in the editing department or something like that. And we've had these reunions that I was lucky to get invited to. And sorry, Gavin.
Every time he drools, he goes. Anyway, keep going.
We've had these reunions for the Star Wars 40th, Empire 40th, Return of the Jedi 40th, and she was there, and I finally got to meet her, and she's really sweet too. But because Frank actually was born in Oakland, I believe, right next to San Francisco, and Jenny still lives in Oakland. So.
Now, I know Aaron's got a question to ask you, but I'm going to just chuck this last one in. But we are going to get to Star Wars very, very soon, guys, because I know a few people are keen to know about that. I didn't know this, but you worked on one of my favorite movies, Starship Troopers, and I think you worked on this sequence here. Dude, you built the models for the ring around the moon or something. Is that right?
The lunar ring, yeah. And my son, who's in the next room, and is 27 and a half years old. He was born while I was working on this movie. That's how I know what movie I was working on. My daughter was born on Pirates of the Caribbean, and my son was born in Starship Troopers. Yeah. We built. There was a section of it from above when she flies out. Yeah, that is it. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Well, in this sequence, that's actually the shuttle just in the middle. So
right, and it's going in, and then we built her little run through the where it's like a roller coaster thing. Yeah.
Did you like that when you saw it in the final version? Were you in the film
it went by so damn quick. I mean, we worked on it. It seemed like we worked on it for months, and it was probably at least a couple months. And it was like over in 15 seconds or something like that.
Was it one of those really long ones? Or would you just do a bit and then somehow duplicate it along the way?
No, it was, we built it. It was probably about 40, 50 feet of tunnel. And we were trying to figure out how to, we had this like rough artwork that the art director, Alex Yeager, gave us that just kind of gives you the impression. It's like, that's what was a great thing about working at ILM as a model maker, is like the art directors would give you something and it was kind of up to your interpretation on what you needed to do with it, particularly something like this where everything was going to be flying by very quickly. And so we're trying to think of whatever we could use to build. So we went to the hardware store and we were buying plumbing supplies, and there was supposed to be these cargo containers, and we got these little bins that we just dressed up. The first visual effects supervisor when he saw them, he said, "Oh no, those look like bins." It's like you're not going to see them when they're going 5,000 miles an hour. And so we built all this stuff, and the camera, as on a motion control, that just drives next through it, and we had little trap doors in the ceiling, so that as it get closer, because it doesn't move that fast, it moves at a very slow speed. The camera does. As it gets closer to the where the boom is going to hit it, we had it flipped up on hinges. So we flipped it up, and then it would move, and then we flipped it up, and it moved, and flipped up, and so that's how we shot it.
I'm going to get to you, Aaron, in 1 second. I like this one. I do like this one from Colin. You're in the closet with Frank and George. There's a novel coming out soon. Yeah, there's a story to be told. Aaron, over to you, son.
We all came out of the closet that day.
This goes back to what you were talking about with Frank Oz being humble and doing different takes of stuff and saying, "Oh, look, I hope no one ever sees that." Of course, on the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, there is him begun the Clone Wars, has about 6 or 7 times because he can't get it right, or not what George Lucas wants. You are in one of the rare industries where your work is documented, and you have, I guess, people filming it while you're working, and then it comes out on special features on DVDs. Do you enjoy that, or do you think, "Oh, gee, I wish these documentary people would get out of my hair and let me do my job"?
It took a little bit of getting used to. You always want to make sure, you kind of, they weren't there, like when we did Star Wars stuff, they weren't there 24/7, but they were there a lot. And fortunately I knew them, and they were friends. So they didn't get you in any kind of compromising position or something like that. But it took a little bit, especially if something's not going exactly right and you're a little frustrated and you don't want to like be throwing things, while you're on camera. The ones that were more uncomfortable, and that's a pretty strong word for it, but the ones that were less fun were like the actual interviews, when they'd sit you down and try to come up with something to say, and I used to think, oh, I should be clever and funny here, and I was never good at clever and funny. So I look at some of them and I go, I shouldn't have said that. But.
Yeah, you know what? I've known you for 30 years. I can crack the joke that, yes, you can't crack jokes. I've got 4 questions that have come through. I'll get you to give the answers relatively short. Karan has asked, did you ever get to keep anything from a movie set?
Not from a film set. No, they were that was really strictly prohibited. But one thing I did get to keep, and it was just because I had to take it back with me, and I didn't return it. Was the Darth Vader versus the Energizer Bunny. Was shot in mid-90s sometime. And we recreated a set of the Cloud City, and in the commercial, Darth doesn't use the right Energizer batteries; he used power cell batteries or whatever their off-brand was. And so he unscrews the lightsaber and pulls out the batteries, and realizes, because his lightsaber died on him, and he's like, oh. Anyway, I had to make that lightsaber, because the real lightsaber doesn't unscrew on the bottom and have batteries in it. So I took a torch, as you call it here, a long, I think it was a 3 battery one, and it had a metal body, an aluminum body, and I machined it and fixed it and polished it up, and then put all the bits and pieces to make it look like a Darth Vader lightsaber, and then unscrewed the back. And so
Christy
I got
asked,
that.
Okay, what was the most frustrating thing you did? Do you have one?
Frustrating. And all of them become frustrating at one point or another. I can't think of anything that was particularly difficult. One of the great things about ILM was that if you didn't know how to do something, there was always somebody nearby that knew. It's like you could always, it was very collaborative, and it was an incredibly supportive artistic community. And so you know, if you were struggling with something and it wasn't working, you could ask somebody there. And, you know, we were lucky to have like Lauren Peterson, who was, you know, been there since Star Wars, and Charlie Bailey, who were really good problem solvers. Another guy, Michael Lynch. Michael Lynch came up with the most ESPA set in the pod arena, all the little Q-tips, the little cotton swabs that made up the crowd. And Michael was also a puppeteer of the See Threepio puppet for episode 1. So they were all really, people like that were all really collaborative, really you know, suggesting solutions. So I can't recall anything that was terribly complex or you know, difficult in that way.
I know Anne's got something. This one's a good question, actually. Russell asked, have you ever seen something done in a movie where you think, oh, no, you idiot, it's been completely wrong, but can't say anything? If so, what's an example? So in other words, you just got to bite your tongue.
That tended to happen more I'm trying I just remembered a story. No, I remembered a story that was a Star Wars story. But there tended to happen more in, like, because I did a lot of commercials for the States, and there was a commercial we did, and this was actually while I was at ILM. I had my own shop and got this, and it was a commercial where all the characters. It was for a car company. No, it wasn't a company. It was somebody that I don't know what they did. They did whatever it was, but they're all car heads at this company. Well, guess what? The joke is they all have cars for heads, you know. So he built these little miniature cars, and the idea is that they would film actors doing all the bodies and stuff like that, and then they'd have a puppeteer holding a car and would match that, and then they would composite the two together. It's like, why don't we just make the cars fit on the people's heads? And I'm watching them film this stuff, and it's like, you know, oh, well, you know, the neck would, yeah, but then you could fix that with digital. It's like, you know, anyway. So there's lots of various reasons politically why they do that, because the effects company, which was a digital company, got the job first. And so, like, well, you know, if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, every solution looks like a nail. So they decided, oh, that's how we're going to do it. And then there was another shot where they wanted they were supposed to drink from a can with a straw coming out, you know, and so the lid opens up and he puts a straw, and they filmed the straw in the cup, the straw in the can, and then they filmed our little model with the lid opening up. It's like, why don't we just do that together? Oh, we got to composite. It's like, no, you don't. You know, I would say stuff, and then they wouldn't invite me back to things.
We're about to get onto Star Wars because we'll have to cover it off. Aaron, you're probably busting your guts to ask something, so away you go, son.
No, I'm happy for our viewers to ask. But staying with cars, I guess one of the later movies you worked on was the first Transformers movie, and when I first saw a real action transform, I thought that was amazing. I've never seen anything like it before. Being in the industry, do you go and see movies yourself and go, wow, I've never seen that before, what an amazing visual effect, or is it all a bit passé?
No, there's been times like the first Matrix was pretty wild, you know, to see that the first time. And you know, the visuals of that. The other one was in Pirates of the Caribbean, I think it's 2, you know, seeing Davy Jones, and Jurassic Park actually was the big one for me. That was right before I came out to the U.S. As a matter of fact, I don't think Jurassic Park had come out at that time. This first time, I came to Australia, and they had the Jurassic Park was so not secret, but they were trying to control it a little bit more. So only we would have, there was a tradition of, not a tradition, but it's part of the process, is like when you do an effect, you shoot for a day, then you go the next day and watch dailies. You watch the footage from the day before. And at the time, it's kind of like, oh, sometimes you'd go in and watch someone else's dailies and something you haven't been working on just to see what they're doing, you know? So like, go and watch Ghostbusters stuff when I was working Ghostbusters 2 when I was working on Indiana Jones Last Crusade. Well, they wouldn't let people go in to see Jurassic Park dailies, and somebody I knew the projectionist, and he let me sneak in and watch it from the projection room, and we were blown away by what they were doing on that film. So yeah, no, there's lots of times you see, and now it's so prevalent. Their effects are so prevalent in just the simplest of films, the straightest of films, that you don't even know that effects are happening, and then you see their effects reel. It's like, holy cow, they changed the whole city background. They shot it during the day or shot it during the night, and now it looks like it's during the day. It's like they're doing so much now, so it's much more invisible. So it's kind of harder to tell sometimes now.
I was going to preempt the answer to this one. So Karan actually asked, was there a project you wished you worked on? And I thought about this yesterday. And I thought, I wonder if when you were working on Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith, you were looking over in New Zealand, seeing what they were doing with Lord of the Rings, thinking, geez, I wish I was over there.
Peter Jackson came through, actually, when they were doing, right before they started doing all that. He said, I didn't meet him, but he walked by, said hello and everything. I wanted to work on Star Wars. I had no interest in working on Lord of the Rings, and to this day, I still haven't seen any of the Lord of the Rings films. Sorry.
Really?
I missed seeing the first one for various reasons, and then it's like the second one came out. It's like, oh well, I probably should go see the first one, but now that's 3 hours I'd have to devote before, and then the third one, it's like, oh, forget it. So I have yet to sit down and watch them all. But
you don't.
Yeah, the one that I wish I would have liked to work on was Apollo 13, because I was a huge space nut. So
very cool.
We've
got 20 minutes left, so we're going to scoot through a couple of your pictures from your Star Wars days. So you can be your R2 and 3PO work on the prequels. So if there's anything,
some of your Australian countrymen there, Justin Dix and Matt Sloan.
Yeah. You discussed this on Saturday about the last sequence for R2 on Revenge of the Sith.
That was R2's last day, yes, and everybody was clamoring to get their photo. So,
speaking of which, I like this response. What a photo! Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it?
Some people have said it looks like a band album cover. So.
Gavin's asked, "Did you ever work on Harry Potter?" I think the answer is no to that. Is that right?
No, I almost did. My wife worked on it. She made some of the flags for the Quidditch match miniature for I think as the second Harry Potter film. And then what's the one where the Goblet of Fire? I almost worked on the boat that came up, but no, I didn't work on it.
I like how you said I almost did. Almost, it means no.
No, I almost did. Well, no, there's a couple things where I started doing some work on it, and then we like a sequence or something. It's like and then they decided not to. So no, I was advising somebody on making that pirate ship for in Goblet.
So you discussed this on Saturday, and you said at this point you could not remember what George said. So we're going to put a caption here, competition. For anybody who's watching right now, if they want to put in what they think George is saying at this moment, we'll read them out in the episode next week and see how smart people are. So it's like, what is George saying at this moment? Because you don't remember. So
I have a pretty good idea. It's faster and more intense.
I never heard him say that, actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's just like an urban legend, isn't it? Really. So
no, he apparently used to say it, but I never heard him say it.
But yeah, you actually don't remember what was going on at this point. Is that right?
No, I don't know what he was talking about. I mean, George would just sometimes spin yarns when we were standing there. So.
No, very, very cool. Anything you want to mention, Aaron, before we get on to the big topic of the night?
The question I probably have, we're going to get onto Star Wars, but is there anything you're particularly proud of or something you've done that never gets brought up or never gets talked about?
One of the things that a lot of people didn't realize, and apparently it was kind of like a bit of a cult thing, was Jedi Dark Forces 2
Jedi Knight.
Yeah, and my wife and I built the stuff for all the cutscenes for that, and I made I think it's called the Briar pistol. I made the briar pistol for the lead character, and then they made. I mean, it became one. I think it's an Andor, isn't it? He uses a briar pistol or something. I don't know, but that's all I was told. But anyway, yeah, I found there's a bit of a cult following on that one. People, yeah, it was just it was a quick thing that we did. She did the costumes, I did the costume props and the hand props that they did for them.
So we're going to get onto your big one, but first things first. This came up during the week. I'm going to ask Aaron about this one. Do you reckon this is legitimate? I mean, there's a lot of money, but I don't recall a prototype Boba Fett, which could actually be the Don Bies version, being painted. What do you reckon of that?
No, that is legitimate. That's why it went for so much money. There's only a couple of hard copies that were hand painted and ready to be displayed before they pulled the rocket firing. But that is the most an action figure has ever sold for. Boba Fett is a cult following, and there's a lot of collectors, but that's a lot of change for an action figure, isn't it?
So
do you know whose that was? Who had that? Because I know Philip Wise had one, and doesn't Steve Sansweet have one?
Well, Dags and I were talking about that. Steve Sansweet has different versions of the prototype, unpainted ones and different colored ones. So who knows what his collection would be. I think there are only 3 known hard copies that are painted. I'm not sure where this one turned up, but it was definitely legit. I mean, it went through a reputable auction house and went for over $1 million in your money, not even our money. So that's
the key thing is, if you took the helmet off, right, what it should look like is this.
Yeah.
Hang on. I've just crashed my bloody computer. So there you go. Give me a second. So
there you
I
go.
put Boba Fett up, and the whole system just goes completely burko. So, Mr. Don, your time as good old Bubble Fat, how was that all about, man?
Well, that was I was working. I was on screen there as the Biff musician with Nelson Hall, who's another. That's Nelson actually to the left of me on the bigger picture. And we were playing the horn section of the scene, and George and Rick McCallum, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. We had started at 7 or whatever. 10 o'clock in the morning, George and Rick are all off in the corner, not in the corner, but they're off in the distance. I see them laughing, and Rick comes up to me and says, "Hey, do we have a Boba Fett costume in the archives?" Because I used to be the archivist. I had left being the archivist shortly before we started filming this stuff, and I had to pause and think, because we had a costume that we used for personal appearances that was pulled together and had all the pieces and everything, but it was going off to the Smithsonian Institute for photography, because the Magic of the Myth exhibition, which I believe came to Australia, was about to start. And I said, well, I think I could pull together one. And he goes, "Oh, it's okay, great." He says, and who could wear it? I'm like, well, me, because I had done it for a character appearance once before. And he said, "Okay, well, at lunchtime, go up and grab the costume. We'll send you up with a PA, and you grab a costume and come back. And at the end of the day, we're going to do the sequence where George had this idea of Boba talking to the dancers, and the dancers were from a local ballet company, and they all had a choreographer and everything. And Nelson and I are just making stuff up as we go along, and." So I did. I ran up to the archives, and I had like about a half hour to pull together that costume. And I have been since told by fans throughout the world that that costume is inaccurate, because it's bits and pieces of different costume bits from different films and stuff. It's like, sorry, it's best I could do in the half hour that I could remember what the parts were, let alone make sure that they were good enough. Because the reason we only had one good suit up there is because all the other parts were either cracked or missing pieces or whatever, because they got abused when they were shooting. So the backpack, in fact, is the one I picked, was the only one that had all the little rockets on the back and the missile on the top, and because most of those would be cracked off, but the one that I picked was one that was rigged for effects. It had a metal in it that held canisters for spraying stuff out when they were filming Return of the Jedi, and it had a big slash in it that was a faked slash, like they got hit with a laser blast or whatever. And so I grabbed all that stuff, came back, we finished shooting, went back, dressed as you saw there. As you can see, I wear glasses. I didn't have contacts at the time, so I had to wear my glasses. And so I came out and dressed like you see me there. And George started laughing at me, saying, "Oh, so maybe Boba moonlights as Jabba's accountant during the day." And I was like, "Oh, that's really funny, George." And then he says, "Okay, so what I want you to do is, like, when I tell you, I want you to." The girls will be talking to you, and then we'll just you guys will just talk like you're hanging out, you're being cool and everything. And then when I tell you, I want you to reach over, and Mercedes is the orange-haired character. I want you to reach over a Mercedes and stroke her face, and then walk out of the shot. And George actually strokes my face. I stroked Darren's face the other day, but George actually stroked my face, and he's showing me this, and I said, okay. So I went up there, and I'm nervous as hell, like I said, I used to do some acting, but this was different. And unfortunately, I had a mask on. Well, obviously not, because they took pictures of me, but and they splattered them all over the internet. But I had the mask on. Anyway, I was nervous. And so I'm not good at improvising or anything. So I'm up there, and I got my arm up. Matter of fact, if you watch carefully, there's a tube on the arm, and in one shot it's there, and in another shot it's not, because it fell off, and we didn't tape it back on. So so I think we shot it 2 times, or we were shooting twice, the sequence prior to me leaving. And then at one point George said, "Hey, everyone, look over here." And we all kind of like look at the camera, and that's in the movie. And then he says, "Okay, Boba, leave." And so I didn't want to rub Mercedes' face because she had makeup on. So I just, touched her under the chin and walked out. And the entire place erupted in laughter. And they didn't do much for my fragile ego, because I thought, oh, I screwed up. My fly was open or something like that. And but no, they just all thought it was funny. And we did it again, and it was over in 10 minutes.
I did like the idea you said you put the outfit on with different bits, and fans have complained. And I agree with Michael, mate. The costume you wore was still screen accurate because it was used on screen. So
that's true.
Yeah, I would have thought when George had to go, so you look like an accountant. I suppose you could retort with, bite me, fanboy, but that probably would have got you sad.
So does George Lucas have a good sense of humor, or does he have a dag sense of humor?
No, it's not that bad. No, he can be funny. He can be amusing. I again, at Skyforce, I told this is that if you know what gaffer's tape is the the paper tape that does a bunch of stuff. And we were standing on Padme's veranda, episode 3, and we it was me, Anthony Daniels, and George, and we were standing there for whatever reason, waiting for something, and they were talking, and there was just like a dead spot, and I was holding a roll of gaffer's tape, because I would always tape Anthony's microphone on top of his hood before we put the mask on as See-Threepio. And I had to hold masking tape, and I looked at it, and I looked at George. I said, "Hey, do you know gaffer's tape?" I said, "Do you know gaffer's tape is like the Force?" I said, "It's got a light side and a dark side, and it binds the galaxy together." And he just kind of looked at me like, huh, and then walked away. So,
classic. We're about to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but two things I wanted to show. And of course, even though some of these didn't get released, it was just concept only, but I like the idea of you got your own merchandising. Imagine that as a pop in your store, dude. What do you reckon about that?
Like all the other pops, it wouldn't sell.
Oh, yeah, I reckon that would take pride of place on the shelf for sure. And as we said on Saturday, you know you've made it when people start cosplaying as you. I mean, that is just the coolest thing ever, dude.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that was that. Go ahead.
Sorry, you've actually, one of the few people to have two action figures made of you, because they've done Barquin Dan and they've done your version of Boba Fett from the special edition. So that's quite an achievement for someone who does behind the scenes visual effects.
Yeah, no, I really like I said, all the stuff I've done, it's like the one thing everyone's going to remember me for is Boba Fett. So,
Aaron, any last questions for Don before we start to wrap up? I've got one last thing to show.
No, I'll let you finish up with what you had.
So one thing I didn't know, like as we said, like Don's obviously played Boba Fett, makes him the coolest dude in the universe. We also found out, I didn't know this, but you've also been Indiana Jones as well. I just didn't know this at all. So this is from Indiana Jones of the Last Crusade. You won't really see because it's such a dark shot, right? But in the sequence in the rally, when Indiana runs into Adolf Hitler and Adolf actually signs the book, you're, Don, wearing Indiana Jones's uniform back here. So How good is that? You've actually been Indiana as well.
Yeah, I'd like to say I was Harrison Ford's body double. Yeah. So
what can I say, mate? That's the coolest thing ever. It's like, oh wow. So you stood there, so mate, I'm actually like, did you get want to tip the hat or something like that?
Well, I wasn't supposed to be Indy. It was a Saturday. We were working on Donovan's Destruction at ILM. The guy that drinks from the wrong grail, and we were working on that. And Michael McAllister, who was the visual effects supervisor, came over and said, "Who's like not doing anything this very moment?" And like I happened to be just standing there, and he says, "Okay, come with me." And so he took me to a stage at ILM, and there was a cameraman setting up the camera, and another guy setting up a light, and they had a couple costumes there, and they said to me, "Oh, you're going to wave this flag in front of the light to make it look like firelight, and we're going to do this insert of Hitler signing a diary." And this is the third time they shot that insert for some reason, and a guy named Duncan was going to wear the Indiana Jones thing. Well, Duncan was a much taller guy, and he couldn't fit into the jacket. So when he's like, trying to squeeze it together, it's like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's trying to squeeze it. So he didn't do it. And so they said, "Oh, you switch, and Duncan, you wave the flag, and Don, you be Indy." So that's how it was.
Very cool. All right, we're about to wrap up. I've got one last thing to show. It's just to show how cool Don is. He actually has in his possession his own time machine. He actually owns a DeLorean. It doesn't drive though, does it?
Well, currently it doesn't. No, because I haven't driven it for a few years.
That's because the flux capacitor's out of juice. But
that's right.
but how cool is that? You got a DeLorean as well, which is absolutely fantastic.
For part 2 of the interview, I'll tell you the Tom Cruise story about when.
That's an absolute classic as well. Any final words for Mr. Don before we buzz him off there, Mr. Aaron?
No, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you for the last hour, and I'm sure all our viewers appreciate the time you've given us as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very, very cool, Mr. Don. We will have you back. I think you're back in Australia in December, so we'll have to get you back for a part 2. So, but stick around. We'll speak to you after the broadcast. So, tutty tars and have a good one, sir. Everybody who's watching right now, just wave at the screen and go, "See you, Don." Oh, dear. How good was that, mate?
That was fantastic. I love when we have a guest on because it beats talking to you all night.
Oh, I tell you what, I wouldn't want to talk to me all night either. So we're about to wrap up in a tick, guys. For those who haven't done so already, be sure to check out the Sci-Fi Zone socials, of course, on YouTube and Instagram or whatever else. But most important of all, if you want to get all your non-existent Don Bies collectibles, this is where you got to go to. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
Like walls and walls of pops. Come and buy them. We've got a bit of everything at Aaron's Collectibles. At the moment, I'm planning a garage sale, which is always very popular with our customers. So keep an eye on our Facebook page to get details on that.
Very, very cool. And it is right on 9 o'clock. I tell you what, we're slick as. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
Slick as snot, mate.
I'll tell you what, and I think we might already have a winner for the George Lucas caption competition when Karan said, "Oh, Aaron's Collectibles is this way." I thought that was absolutely spectacular.
I thought he was saying C-3PO is this tall and R2 is this tall.
Exactly right. This one goes there, that one goes there. All right, we're going to buzz off. We're going to leave you to it. We'll see you all next week. Party hard, rock on, and hopefully enjoy the show for tonight. Okay, take care, guys.
Have a good night, guys. See you.